The screams of terrified horses were the first thing Millicent Hayes heard. Then came the smell. Acrid smoke, burning hay, and something else. The smell of pure hatred. Flames licked at the barn's old wooden beams, painting the Montana dawn in a hellish orange glow. She stumbled back, choking, her calico dress already singed at the hem. She'd only come to collect the eggs, a simple morning chore. But the world had turned to fire and ash around her. She had tried to free the horses. It was a foolish, desperate act, but their panicked whinnies were more than she could bear. Now the main entrance had collapsed, a wall of flame where a door used to be. Death was circling, a patient predator in the smoke. Montana in 1876 didn't forgive mistakes, and Millicent feared she'd just made her last one. Through the roar, a voice, deep and steady. "Hello? Is anyone in there?" "Here!" she cried, her voice a raw, broken thing. "I'm trapped." The eastern wall of the barn groaned, then splintered. An axe blade smashed through the wood, once, twice. A jagged hole appeared in the world. Through the shimmering heat, a figure emerged, broad-shouldered and purposeful. A bandana covered his face, a low-brimmed hat shielded his eyes. He didn't hesitate. "Take my hand," the stranger commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. He reached through a gap in the flames. She didn't think. She just moved, grasping his gloved hand. He pulled her with incredible strength, but just as she reached the opening, a massive, burning beam crashed down between them, showering her in a storm of sparks. She screamed. "Hold on!" he yelled. In one impossible motion, the man leaped through the fire, scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing, and charged back toward the opening he'd made. Millicent buried her face in his chest, the heat so intense it felt like her skin was melting. They burst out into the cool, clean morning air. He didn't stop running until they were a safe distance away. Behind them, the barn roof gave way with a deafening roar, sending a pillar of fire and embers into the sky. He set her down gently. "The horses," she gasped, coughing up smoke. "Got most of them out before I heard you," he said, pulling down his bandana. His face was streaked with soot, but his eyes were a piercing, concerned blue. "Are you hurt, miss?" "Just burns, I think," she stammered, finally getting a good look at her rescuer. He was tall, weathered, with a strong jaw and the weary look of a man who'd seen too much. A cowboy, judging by the worn leather chaps and dusty boots. "Name's Finan Calloway," he said, offering her a canteen. "Was just passing by when I saw the smoke." "Millicent Hayes," she replied, her voice trembling as she took a grateful sip. "This is my father's ranch. He's away in Helena." She stared at the smoldering ruins. She couldn't understand how it happened. Finan's expression hardened. "This wasn't an accident, Miss Hayes." He pointed toward the edge of the clearing. "Saw tracks leading away. 3 riders. They weren't in any hurry. Someone set this fire on purpose." A cold dread washed over Millicent, colder than the morning air. "But who would—" Finan interrupted her, his brow furrowed. "Your father. He wouldn't be Thomas Hayes, would he?" She nodded, a new sense of unease creeping in. How did this stranger know her father's name? "Been hearing talk in town," Finan said, his voice low. "Folks saying your father's land blocks the only good access to the river. A cattle baron named Whitaker has been making a lot of noise about it." Millicent's hands started to shake. "Jeremiah Whitaker. He's been trying to buy our land for months. My father refused." "Well," Finan said grimly, helping her to her feet. "Seems he's done asking nicely." Just then, several ranch hands came running from the main house, led by Edgar, her father's foreman. "Miss Millicent!" Edgar cried, his face pale with shock. "Thank the Lord you're alive!" As the men worked to contain the last of the flames, Millicent couldn't take her eyes off Finan Calloway. He moved with an easy confidence, directing the other men with a quiet authority that they instinctively followed. He wasn't just some passing drifter. He knew ranching, he knew fire, and he knew something was deeply wrong. Once the immediate danger passed, she told Edgar, "We need to send for Father." "Telegraph office won't open till noon," Edgar replied, wiping soot from his face. "And with your father 2 days' ride away, it'll be nearly a week before he can get back here." Finan walked over, his eyes scanning the ground. "Miss Hayes, those tracks I mentioned, they lead east, straight toward Whitaker's property. I'd bet my best horse it was his men." Edgar spat on the ground. "Wouldn't put it past that snake. Been threatening to dam the creek if Mr. Hayes don't sell." Millicent felt a surge of anger that burned away her fear. She squared her shoulders. "Then we need proof. If Whitaker thinks he can scare us off while Father is away, he's made a terrible mistake." A small, grim smile touched Finan's lips. "That's brave talk, Miss Hayes. But these men play for keeps. You're vulnerable out here alone." "I've lived in Montana territory my whole life, Mr. Calloway. I'm not helpless." She met his gaze, her chin held high. "But I would appreciate your help, if you're willing to give it." Finan studied her for a long moment. He saw the soot on her face, the singed edges of her hair, but he also saw the unbending steel in her eyes. Finally, he gave a slow nod. "I've got business in Helena myself, but it can wait a few days. I'll stay. We'll sort this out." That evening, after Millicent had washed and changed into a clean dress, she found Finan on the porch, cleaning his revolver by the soft glow of a lantern. The metallic click-clack of the mechanism was a strangely comforting sound. She brought him a plate of stew and sat in the chair beside him. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly. "You saved my life." He shrugged, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. Any decent man would have done the same. "Perhaps," she said, "but not every man would stay to help afterwards." She watched his strong, capable hands reassemble the weapon. "What takes you to Helena, Mr. Calloway?" He hesitated, sliding the revolver smoothly back into its holster. "Looking for work. Thought I might try my hand at something different than chasing cows." "You don't strike me as a man who just chases cows." He let out a low chuckle, a surprisingly warm sound. "No? What do I strike you as, then?" "A man with a past," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "One you're not running from, but not exactly embracing, either." Finan's small smile faded. The lantern light caught the lines of weariness around his eyes. "You've got sharp eyes, Miss Hayes." "Millicent," she corrected softly. "After a man carries you through a fire, I think first names are in order." "Millicent," he repeated, the name tasting strange on his lips. "Then you should call me Finn." They sat in a comfortable silence, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the distant lowing of cattle. The night felt peaceful, but it was a lie. The peace had been broken. "Tomorrow," Finn said, his voice pulling her from her thoughts. "I'll ride out, follow those tracks, see what I can find." "I'm going with you," she declared, leaving no room for argument. "That's not a good idea." "It's my family's ranch, Finn. My fight. I will not sit here and wait while someone tries to burn us out of our home." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. He just shook his head, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "Stubborn as a Missouri mule, aren't you?" "I prefer determined," she replied, a hint of a smile returning to her face. "And I'm an excellent shot." They set out at first light. Millicent on her spirited chestnut mare, Finn on a powerful bay gelding. The tracks were just as he'd said. 3 riders, moving with an arrogance that spoke volumes. They weren't trying to hide. They wanted to be found. Whitaker's foreman is a man named Silas Burke, Millicent explained as they rode. He's a nasty piece of work, a hired enforcer. They rode for 2 hours, crossing the invisible line onto Whitaker's territory. The land here felt different, barren, wounded. As they crested a rise, Finn suddenly held up a hand, pulling his horse to a halt. In the distance, a small cloud of dust was rising against the morning sky. "Riders," he said, his voice low and calm. "Coming this way." Millicent's heart hammered against her ribs. "Should we hide?" "Too late. They've seen us." Finn's hand moved, resting casually on the butt of his holstered revolver. "Just follow my lead. If this goes bad, you ride for home. You ride hard, and you don't look back. Understand?" Before she could even think to argue, 3 men on horseback were approaching. They fanned out, a classic intimidation tactic. The man in the center was a bear of a man, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite and left out in the sun too long. Silas Burke. "Well now," Burke drawled, his cold eyes taking in Millicent before dismissing her and focusing on Finn. "Ain't you a pretty sight, Miss Hayes? Heard you had a little trouble over at your place. A real shame about that barn." "Wasn't a shame," Finn replied, his voice level and even. "More like a crime." Burke's gaze narrowed. "Don't believe I know you, stranger." "Fine Ann Calloway. I'm working for the Hayes family now." "Is that so?" Burke's smile was thin and cruel. "Funny. Mr. Whitaker didn't mention hiring any new help." "I didn't say I was working for Whitaker," Finn shot back. The air crackled with tension. Millicent spurred her horse forward slightly. "We're just checking our property boundaries, Mr. Burke. There seem to be a lot of misunderstandings lately." Burke let out a laugh that sounded like rocks grinding together. "Oh, the boundaries are clear enough, Miss Hayes. It's your father who's confused. Mr. Whitaker made him a fair offer." "Offering half of what our land is worth while threatening our water is not a fair offer," Millicent snapped, her temper flaring. "Business is business," Burke shrugged. "And your pa might want to reconsider his position, especially after recent events." Finn shifted his horse, subtly positioning himself between Millicent and Burke. "That sounds an awful lot like a confession." One of Burke's men, a wiry man with a face like a road map of scars, instinctively reached for his gun. Burke shot him a look, and the man's hand froze. "Just some friendly advice," Burke said, his eyes locked on Finn. "These parts can get dangerous, especially for a pretty young woman all on her own." "She's not alone," Finn said, his voice flat and hard as steel. Burke held his gaze for a long, silent moment. Then he nodded slowly. "You're trespassing. Best you head on back to Hazeland. Mr. Whitaker ain't as patient as I am." He tipped his hat in a mocking gesture to Millicent. "Give your pa my regards when he gets back." As the 3 men turned and rode away, Millicent let out a shaky breath. "That man, he confessed. He all but said they did it." "He did," Finn agreed, his eyes still watching the retreating riders. "But we have no proof." He paused, his gaze fixed on something. "No, wait. I did see something while he was talking." "What was it?" "The man on the right," Finn said, turning his horse back the way they came. "His boots. They had a distinctive spur mark on the heel, a broken star pattern. I saw that same exact pattern in the tracks leading away from your barn this morning." Millicent's eyes widened. It wasn't enough for the law, not yet. But it was everything to her. It was confirmation. A link. A thread she could pull on until the whole rotten tapestry unraveled. They rode back toward the ranch, the morning sun climbing higher in the sky. But as they crested the final hill overlooking the Hayes property, their relief turned to horror. Smoke was rising again, this time from one of the corrals, and the distinct crack of rifle fire echoed across the valley. They spurred their horses into a gallop, the sound of more gunshots driving them onward. They arrived to see Edgar and the other hands pinned down, exchanging fire with a half-dozen riders who were trying to drive off the main herd of cattle. "Stay back," Finn ordered Millicent as he drew his revolver, but she was already pulling her father's heavy rifle from its saddle scabbard. "This is my home," she said, her voice fierce and low. "I am done hiding." Before he could stop her, she urged her mare forward, taking cover behind a cluster of large boulders that gave her a clear line of sight. She took a steadying breath, aimed, and fired. The shot kicked up a cloud of dust right at the feet of a rustler's horse, causing it to rear and throw its rider. Finn muttered something under his breath that might have been a curse or a prayer, and joined her, his own shots precise and deadly effective. Pinned between Finn and Millicent's rifle fire from the ridge and the ranch hands below, the rustlers panicked. They were no longer the hunters, they were the prey. They broke and ran, abandoning their attempt on the cattle and fleeing back toward Whitaker's land. The fight was over as quickly as it had begun. They left one man behind, groaning on the ground, clutching a shoulder wound where one of Edgar's shots had found its mark. Millicent and Finn rode down to the corral. "Recognize him?" Finn asked Edgar. The foreman nodded grimly. "Name's Jessup. He works for Whitaker, all right." Finn dismounted and knelt beside the wounded man. Jessup glared at him with pure hatred. "We have to get the sheriff," Millicent said, her hands still tight on her rifle. "This has gone too far." "Sheriff's 2 days' ride away," Edgar reminded her, his face grim. "And everyone knows he's on Whitaker's payroll. He won't do a thing." Finn stood up, his face set like stone. "Then I'll ride to Helena. I'll get your father, and I'll find a territorial marshal, someone the Whitakers of the world can't buy. This ends now, before someone gets killed." The thought of Finn leaving sent a surprising and unwelcome chill through Millicent. In just 2 days, his presence had become an anchor in the storm. "I should go with you," she said. "No." Finn's voice was firm. "It's too dangerous, and your people need you here." His eyes softened for just a moment. "Don't worry, I'll be back as fast as I can." That evening, a heavy quiet settled over the ranch. After they had patched up Jessup and locked him in the tack room, Millicent found Finn on the porch, staring out into the darkness. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft in the night air. "For everything." He turned to look at her, his face unreadable in the shadows. "You were right before," he said, "about my past. After I lost my job as a deputy, I started drifting, taking work where I could find it, moving on whenever things got complicated." He looked back out at the vast, dark landscape. "But some things," he said, his voice lower now, "are worth getting complicated for." The way he said it, the way his gaze returned to hers, made her heart skip a beat. Without thinking, she reached out and put her hand on his arm. "Be careful on the road to Helena," she whispered. "Whitaker's men will try to stop you." Finn turned his hand and clasped hers, his grip warm and strong. "I've faced worse odds." "Tell me," she said, needing to understand the man who had so completely upended her world. "I was a deputy sheriff in a Colorado mining town," he said, his voice distant. "The town was basically owned by a big mining company. The sheriff, he started taking their money, looking the other way when they broke the law. I wouldn't." His jaw tightened. "Things ended badly for me. They ran me out of town, ruined my name." He didn't say more, but she could feel the weight of the story he wasn't telling. The betrayal, the injustice. It explained the sadness she saw in his eyes. He wasn't just a drifter. He was an exile. Dawn came too quickly. Finn prepared for the long ride, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. Millicent insisted he take her father's best horse, a powerful black stallion. 2 days to get there, Finn calculated. A day to find your father and a marshal. 2 days back. 5 days if I don't run into trouble. And if you do? The worry was plain in her voice. Then it might take 6, he said with a grim smile. As he mounted the stallion, she impulsively reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn silver locket that had belonged to her mother. Take this, she said, pressing it into his hand. For luck. Finn looked at the delicate object, then back at her, understanding its value. I'll keep it safe, he promised, tucking it into his shirt pocket. He looked at her one last time, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. Then he turned the horse and rode away, disappearing into the vast Montana morning. 3 days passed. 3 days of tense, watchful silence. Millicent ran the ranch with a firm hand, organizing the men into watches, never letting her rifle out of her sight. Every dust cloud on the horizon made her heart leap. Every setting sun brought a fresh wave of fear. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a lone rider approached. It was one of Whitaker's men, the one with the pockmarked face. He stopped his horse just out of rifle range. "Miss Hayes," he called out. "Got a message from Mr. Whitaker. Seems your cowboy friend never made it to Helena." Ice flooded Millicent's veins. "What have you done to him?" The man grinned, a hideous, triumphant expression. "Nothing. Yet. Mr. Whitaker invites you to his ranch to discuss terms for Mr. Calloway's release. He expects you by sundown." The threat was clear. "And if I refuse? Then I reckon your friend is going to have a real unfortunate accident out on the trail. It's dangerous territory out here." The man tipped his hat. "Oh, and one more thing. Come alone, or don't bother coming at all." He wheeled his horse and galloped away, leaving a cloud of dust and dread hanging in the air. Her men begged her not to go. "It's a trap, Miss Millicent," one of them pleaded. "I know," she said, her mind already working, calculating. "If I don't go, they'll kill him. I have no choice, but we won't play by their rules." She devised a plan, a desperate, long-shot plan. She would ride to Whitaker's ranch alone, just as they demanded. But 2 of her best men would follow, circling around to the back of the property. They were to create a diversion, and in the confusion, she would find a way to free Finn. It was a fool's errand. It was all she had. As the sun bled across the western mountains, Millicent rode toward the lion's den. She'd hidden a small Derringer pistol in her boot. Whitaker's ranch house was an arrogant monstrosity, a 2-story palace dropped into the middle of the wilderness. Silas Burke met her at the door. "No weapons, Miss Hayes," he grunted. "I'm not carrying any," she lied, her face a mask of calm. He led her into a lavish study. Jeremiah Whitaker sat behind a massive desk, a fat spider in the center of his web. "Miss Hayes," he said with a smile that didn't reach his cold, piggish eyes. "So glad you could join us." "Where is he?" she demanded. "All in good time," Whitaker purred. "First, let's discuss business." He pushed a stack of papers across the desk. "A deed to your father's land. You'll sign it over to me." "I can't sign for my father." "You will sign an intent to sell," Whitaker countered. "And in exchange, your friend Mr. Calloway will be allowed to leave, unharmed." She saw a flicker of movement in the shadows behind the desk. A man stepped forward. It was Finn. His face was bruised and swollen, and his hands were tied tightly behind his back. "Millicent," he said, his voice rough. "You shouldn't have come here." "A touching reunion," Whitaker sneered. "Now sign the papers, Miss Hayes, or we'll see how long your brave cowboy lasts in my root cellar." Millicent's eyes met Finn's across the room. He gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. No, she had to stall. She had to give her men time. She walked slowly toward the desk, her hand reaching for the pen. "Let me read the documents first," she said. As Whitaker leaned forward eagerly, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house, breaking glass, shouting. The diversion had begun. Burke spun around, drawing his gun. But in that split second of distraction, Finn moved. He launched himself forward, slamming his bound hands into Burke's side. At the same time, Millicent dove, pulling the derringer from her boot. She leveled it at Whitaker, who was fumbling to open a desk drawer. "Don't even think about it," she warned, her voice steady. Gunfire erupted outside. Her men were engaged. The trap was sprung. Chaos reigned. Finn, using the sharp edge of a letter opener on the desk, sawed through his ropes. "We have to go," he yelled, grabbing a shotgun that was leaning against the wall. "Your men can't hold them off for long." "Not yet." Millicent kept her pistol aimed at Whitaker's chest, but as she looked at him, cowering behind his desk, she saw something else. A flicker of movement in the darkest corner of the room. Another man had been there the whole time, watching. As he stepped into the lantern light, Millicent's blood ran cold. It was Edgar, her father's foreman, the man she trusted with her life. He held a rifle in his hands, and it was aimed not at Whitaker, but at Finn. "I'm sorry, Miss Millicent," Edgar said, his face a mess of shame and fear. "He gave me no choice. He knows about things." The ultimate betrayal. Edgar had been the snake in their garden all along. He was the one who fed Whitaker information. He was the one who led Finn into the ambush. "Drop the shotgun, Calloway," Edgar ordered, his voice trembling, "or I'll shoot her." Finn froze, his eyes blazing with fury. Millicent felt a wave of despair wash over her. Her plan had failed. They were trapped. But then, the unexpected happened. Whitaker, seeing his chance, made a lunge for the shotgun in Finn's hands. As they wrestled for the weapon, a new sound split the night. Not a gunshot, a whistle. A loud, sharp signal from outside. The main door of the study burst open. It wasn't her ranch hands. It was a half-dozen men she'd never seen before, armed with rifles and moving with military precision. They swarmed the room. At their lead was a grim-faced man with a silver star pinned to his vest, a United States Marshal. And right behind him was her father, Thomas Hayes. "It's over, Jeremiah," her father said, his voice ringing with authority. Whitaker stared, his face collapsing in disbelief. Edgar dropped his rifle and put his hands in the air. Burke was already being subdued. Millicent ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. "Father, but how?" "Finn's plan was never to ride to Helena," Thomas Hayes explained, his arm holding her tight. "That was a decoy for Edgar to report back to Whitaker. Finn circled back. He met me and the marshals at our pre-arranged rendezvous point. I was never in Helena on business, child. I was gathering evidence against this man for the territorial governor. It was all a setup, a grand deception. Finn had suspected a traitor from the very beginning. He'd used himself as bait to draw the entire conspiracy out into the open." The marshal turned to Finn. "Well, Calloway, your information was good. Looks like we've got the whole nest of vipers." He looked at Whitaker with disgust. "Jeremiah Whitaker, you're under arrest for arson, cattle rustling, and the attempted murder of a federal officer in the Colorado Territory." Finn's name. The marshal had just cleared his name. The crime that had exiled him, that had turned him into a drifter. It was Whitaker's crime all along. With Whitaker and his men in chains, a strange quiet fell over the opulent, violent room. Finn walked over to Millicent. He gently took the derringer from her still trembling hand. "I told you I'd be back," he said, his voice soft. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out the small silver locket she had given him. It was slightly dented, but intact. kept it safe. She looked from the locket in his hand to the fierce loyalty in his eyes. He hadn't just saved her ranch. He hadn't just saved her life. He had orchestrated a masterpiece of justice, risking everything to unmask a tyrant and reclaim his own honor. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Finn leaned down and kissed her. It was not a kiss of desperation or relief. It was a kiss of certainty. A promise. In the end, it was a clean sweep. Whitaker's confession, combined with the evidence Thomas Hayes had gathered and Edgar's full testimony, brought down not just the cattle baron, but the corrupt local sheriff as well. The whole rotten enterprise was dismantled from the top down. A few weeks later, the territorial marshal offered Finn his old job back, a deputy's badge, and a chance to rebuild his life as a lawman. He turned it down. He chose a different life, a different future. They were married in the newly built barn, on the very spot where they had first met in a storm of fire and fear. The whole valley came to celebrate. As they stood together, watching the sun set over the mountains, Finn took her hand. "Still carrying you through the flames," he whispered. Millicent smiled, her heart full. "We carry each other," she said. Their love story wasn't a simple one. It was forged in violence and betrayal, built on a foundation of courage and a stubborn refusal to back down. They had faced down the worst their world had to offer and had come out the other side, stronger and more determined than ever. What do you think is the true meaning of justice? Is it the punishment of the wicked or the protection of the innocent? If you enjoyed this story of redemption and frontier justice, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales from the wild heart of the world.